Shy nurse greeted the millionaire's deaf mom with sign language, unaware her son, the CEO, was falling for her. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital flickered as Maya Chen adjusted her stethoscope, her hands trembling slightly, as they always did when she had to interact with anyone beyond her patients. At 26, she had chosen nursing precisely because she could pour all her compassion into care, while hiding behind medical protocols and quiet efficiency. Words had never come easily to her, not since childhood when her stuttering had made her the target of cruel jokes. But her hands, they spoke a different language entirely, one she'd learned for her younger brother, who had been born deaf. She didn't know that in exactly 3 minutes, those same hands would change her life forever. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to Trillionaire in Love for more heartwarming stories that celebrate love in all its forms. Drop a comment below telling us about a time when kindness changed your life. Your support means everything to us. The emergency room doors burst open with a force that made Maya jump. A woman in her 60s stumbled through, clutching her chest, her face pale and contorted with pain. Behind her, security was trying to explain something, but the woman's eyes were wild with confusion and fear. Maya recognized that look immediately. It wasn't just pain. It was the terror of not being able to communicate what was wrong. Without thinking, Maya rushed forward, her shyness evaporating in the face of someone's need. She gently took the woman's hand and began signing, her fingers moving with practiced grace. "Are you in pain? Where does it hurt?" The woman's eyes widened, tears spilling down her cheeks as she frantically signed back. "My chest. Can't breathe. Please, no one understands me." Maya's training kicked in as she guided the woman to a wheelchair, signing reassurances while simultaneously calling for a cardiac team. Her hands moved between signing and medical care, with a fluidity that came from years of loving her brother, of understanding that communication was more than just words. What Maya didn't notice was the man who had just entered through the same doors, frozen in the entrance, watching her with an expression that mixed shock, admiration, and something deeper. Alexander Morrison, CEO of Morrison Industries, had been searching for his mother after she'd wandered away from their car in confusion. He'd arrived expecting chaos, expecting his mother's panic at being unable to make herself understood in a medical emergency. Instead, he found a slight, dark-haired nurse who moved with gentle confidence, speaking to his mother in the language his mother had thought no one outside their family knew. Over the next hour, as tests were run and his mother was stabilized with medication for her angina attack, Alexander couldn't take his eyes off Maya. She moved through the emergency room like a whisper, barely speaking to colleagues except when necessary, but with his mother, her hands danced and her face came alive with expression. His mother, Alexander Morrison, who had spent a lifetime feeling isolated despite her wealth, was actually smiling. When Eleanor was finally settled in a private room, Alexander approached Maya at the nurse's station. She was completing paperwork, her head down, a curtain of black hair hiding her face. "Excuse me," he said softly. Maya looked up, and for the first time their eyes met. Alexander felt something shift in his chest. She had the most expressive eyes he'd ever seen, deep brown and full of an emotion he couldn't quite name. But the moment she realized he was speaking to her directly, those eyes filled with anxiety. She looked down quickly. "I wanted to thank you," Alexander continued, his voice gentler now, "for my mother. Eleanor Morrison. You probably saved her life, but more than that, you gave her dignity when she was most vulnerable." Maya's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally managed a whisper. "Just doing my job." "No," Alexander said firmly. "What you did was extraordinary. Where did you learn sign language?" "My brother," Maya said quietly, still not meeting his eyes. "He's deaf." Alexander wanted to say more, wanted to keep her there, but a colleague called Maya away to another patient. She fled with visible relief, and Alexander was left with the business card he'd wanted to give her still in his hand, and a feeling in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. His world of corporate mergers and business deals suddenly seemed hollow compared to the quiet grace he'd just witnessed. Over the next 3 days, as his mother remained in the hospital for observation, Alexander found reasons to visit that went beyond filial duty. He told himself he was just being thorough, making sure his mother received the best care. But he knew the truth. He was hoping to see Maya again, to watch her hands speak poetry to his mother, to catch one of those rare smiles that transformed her shy face into something luminous. Maya, for her part, was completely oblivious to Alexander's attention. She was too focused on avoiding him. Every time the tall, handsome man in the expensive suit appeared, her heart raced with anxiety. She knew who he was now. The other nurses whispered about Alexander Morrison, the billionaire CEO whose company had just been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine. He was so far out of her orbit, they might as well have been different species. But Eleanor Morrison saw everything her son couldn't hide, and everything Maya tried to. On the third evening, as Maya was checking Eleanor's vitals, the older woman signed a question that made Maya freeze. "Do you think my son is handsome?" Maya's face turned scarlet. She fumbled with the blood pressure cuff, her hands suddenly clumsy. Eleanor laughed silently, her eyes twinkling. "He likes you," Eleanor signed. "I haven't seen him look at anyone like that since his divorce 3 years ago. That woman only wanted his money. But you don't even know what you've done to him, do you?" Maya shook her head frantically, signing back. "Please, Mrs. Morrison, he's just being polite because I helped you. People like him don't notice people like me. People like you," Eleanor signed with emphasis, "are exactly who people like him need. My son lives in a world of sharks and schemers. You're real, you're kind, and you speak my language, literally and figuratively." Before Maya could respond, Alexander entered with flowers, stopping short when he saw the two of them in animated conversation with their hands. Something about the scene, his mother looking more alive than she had in years, and this shy, beautiful nurse who'd somehow breached all his walls without even trying, made him bold. "Have dinner with me," he said suddenly. Both women turned to look at him. Eleanor smiled. Maya looked terrified. "I can't," Maya whispered. "Why not?" Maya's hands twisted together. How could she explain that she came from a world of night shifts and student loans, of taking the bus because she couldn't afford a car, of speech therapy sessions she'd finally stopped attending because they never quite fixed her? How could she tell him that the very thought of sitting across a table from him at some fancy restaurant, where she'd inevitably say something wrong or stutter or simply freeze with anxiety, made her want to disappear? "Because I'm not," she paused, struggling. "I'm not comfortable with people. I'm not good at talking. I'm not the kind of person who has dinner with CEOs." Alexander took a step closer, his voice incredibly gentle. "What if I told you I'm not comfortable with people either? That I spend my days wearing a mask, saying what's expected, playing a role? What if I told you that watching you with my mother, I saw someone who was more genuine in 5 minutes than most people I know are in a lifetime?" Maya's eyes finally lifted to meet his, and she saw something there that shook her. Sincerity, vulnerability, a loneliness that matched her own. Eleanor, watching this exchange, signed to her son for the first time in front of someone outside the family. Alexander had learned sign language as a child, though he rarely used it anymore. But now his hands moved with his mother's native fluency. "Don't let her run away from this, Alex, and don't you run either. You've both been hiding for too long." The challenges that followed weren't the dramatic obstacles of fairy tales, but the real grinding difficulties of two people from different worlds trying to bridge a gap. Their first date was a disaster. Alexander took Maya to an exclusive restaurant where she was so overwhelmed by the attention, the servers, the other diners recognizing him, that she excused herself to the bathroom and had a panic attack. She called her best friend, ready to slip out the back exit. But Alexander found her first. He'd noticed her distress, seen it written in the tension of her shoulders, the way her hands had started to shake. Without a word, he took her hand and led her out of the restaurant, ignoring the stares and whispers. They ended up at a small coffee shop near the hospital, sitting in a corner booth with cheap ceramic mugs and day-old pastries. There, with the pressure gone, they finally talked. Or rather, Maya slowly opened up, her words halting at first, but growing stronger as Alexander listened with a focus he'd never given to any business deal. She told him about growing up with a speech impediment, about how she'd learned early that staying quiet was safer than risking mockery. She told him about her brother, about how learning sign language had given her a way to communicate that felt natural, how caring for patients gave her purpose because she could help without having to perform socially. She told him about her mountain of nursing school debt, about sharing an apartment with 2 roommates, about sending money home to help her parents every month. Alexander, in turn, shared things he'd never told anyone. About the loneliness of being the only hearing child in a family where his parents and sister were deaf. About being sent to boarding schools where he learned to hide his home life because the other wealthy kids didn't understand. About his ex-wife who'd seen him as a bank account and status symbol, who'd left him more cynical about genuine connection. About building an empire that impressed everyone, but left him feeling empty. The second challenge came from Alexander's world. When news leaked that the CEO of Morrison Industries was dating a nurse, the reactions were swift and brutal. Business magazines speculated about whether he was having a mental breakdown. Social media picked apart Maya's appearance, her background, her worth. Alexander's board of directors called an emergency meeting, concerned about his judgment and the company's image. Maya saw the headlines, read the comments that called her a gold digger, a social climber, someone trying to trap a rich man. The anxiety that had plagued her entire life roared back with vicious intensity. She stopped answering Alexander's calls, ignored his messages. She convinced herself that everyone was right, that she didn't belong in his world, that she was only going to damage him and humiliate herself. But Alexander wasn't his father, wasn't the cold businessman everyone thought they knew. He spent 3 days tracking Maya down, finally finding her at her brother's apartment where she'd been hiding. Her brother, Daniel, opened the door and signed a question. "Are you the guy who's hurting my sister?" Alexander signed back. "I'm the guy who's falling in love with your sister, and I need her to know that nothing else matters." Daniel studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Maya was curled up on the couch, her eyes red from crying. When she saw Alexander, she tried to turn away, but he sat down beside her, not touching her, just present. "I know you're scared," he said softly. "I know the attention is overwhelming. But Maya, when I'm with you, I'm more myself than I've ever been. You make me want to be better, kinder, more real. I don't care what the magazines say or what my board thinks. I care about you." "But I can't do this," Maya whispered. "I can't be in the spotlight. I can't go to your galas and charity events and smile for cameras. I'll freeze up. I'll embarrass you." "You'll be exactly who you are," Alexander interrupted. "And I'll be right beside you. We'll face it together." Maya, love isn't about being perfect or comfortable all the time. It's about choosing each other even when it's hard. The third challenge came from Maya herself, from the voice in her head that insisted she wasn't enough. Even as she tentatively agreed to try again, even as their relationship deepened over the following months, she struggled with feelings of inadequacy. Alexander's world was so big, so intimidating. At a charity gala, where she was introduced as his girlfriend, Maya had a moment of such intense anxiety that she literally couldn't speak. She stood frozen while people waited for her to say something, anything. It was Eleanor who saved her. Alexander's mother swept in, signing rapidly to Maya while speaking aloud for the audience. "My dear friend Maya and I were just discussing the importance of hospital funding for communication services. Did you know that nearly 1 in 8 people have some form of hearing loss, yet most medical facilities are woefully unprepared to serve them?" The conversation shifted, and Maya found herself nodding along as Eleanor spoke, occasionally interpreting a sign for the curious onlookers. By treating Maya's signing not as a quirk, but as a valuable skill, Eleanor reframed the entire interaction. Later, Maya cried in the car, overwhelmed with gratitude. "You belong here," Eleanor signed to her, "not because of my son, but because you have worth and value on your own. Your kindness, your compassion, your ability to bridge worlds, these are rare gifts. Don't let fear rob you of the life you deserve." Something shifted in Maya that night. She began to see that her shyness, her struggles with verbal communication didn't make her less than. They made her who she was, someone with unique empathy and understanding. She started therapy specifically for social anxiety, not to become someone else, but to develop tools to manage the overwhelming feelings. Alexander, meanwhile, used his position not to shield Maya from his world, but to change his world to be more inclusive. He started a foundation focused on accessibility and deaf services, putting Maya on the board as a consultant. He hired interpreters for all company events. He partnered with Maya's hospital to create better communication protocols. He showed his business associates that his relationship with Maya wasn't a liability, but an asset, opening his eyes to perspectives and needs he'd been blind to. The turning point came a year after they met. Alexander was facing a hostile takeover attempt, a vicious business battle that consumed all his energy. In the middle of crisis meetings and legal battles, he collapsed from exhaustion in his office. It was Maya who found him. Maya who gently but firmly told him that he was burning out. That money and power meant nothing if he destroyed himself in the process. "You taught me that I'm enough," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Now let me teach you the same thing. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Alex. You're enough just as you are." It was the moment Alexander realized that Maya's quiet strength was exactly what he'd been missing his entire life. He restructured his priorities, delegated more, learned to set boundaries. The takeover attempt failed, but more importantly, he discovered that his worth wasn't measured by his company's stock price. 2 years after that first meeting in the emergency room, Alexander took Maya back to the small coffee shop where they'd had their real first date. There, with no cameras or spectators, just the two of them in a corner booth with cheap ceramic mugs, he signed a question he'd practiced 1,000 times. "Will you marry me?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. Her hands shook as she signed back. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Their wedding was a perfect blend of their two worlds. A small ceremony with close family and friends, where Eleanor signed the readings and Daniel served as both best man and interpreter. Maya wore a simple dress that made her feel beautiful without being costume. Alexander cried openly when she walked down the aisle, no longer caring who saw his vulnerability. At the reception, Maya gave a speech that she'd written and practiced for weeks. Her voice wavered, and she paused frequently, but everyone listened with rapt attention as she spoke about learning that love means accepting someone completely, fears and flaws and all. She spoke about how Alexander had taught her courage and how she hoped she'd taught him compassion. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, and when she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Years later, when people asked Maya about her fairy tale romance, she always corrected them gently. "It wasn't a fairy tale," she would sign and say. "It was better. It was real. We didn't complete each other or fix each other. We chose each other every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard." Alexander and Maya's foundation grew to become one of the most respected organizations for accessibility and inclusive healthcare in the country. Maya went back to school and became a speech therapist, specializing in anxiety disorders, helping others find their voice in whatever form that took. Alexander remained CEO but was known as much for his humanity as his business acumen. Eleanor lived to see her first grandchild, a little girl who was born hearing but grew up bilingual in English and American Sign Language, bridging worlds as her parents had done. The shy nurse and the millionaire CEO built a life that was messy and beautiful, challenging and rewarding, exactly as real love should be. Because Maya had learned that being seen wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. And Alexander had learned that true connection required vulnerability, not perfection. Together they proved that love isn't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. It's about two people who choose to be brave enough to be themselves. Together. Thank you so much for watching this story on Trillionaire in Love. If this story touched your heart, please give us a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. We'd love to know what you thought, so drop a comment below sharing your favorite moment from Maya and Alexander's journey. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our heartwarming stories about love, courage, and finding where you truly belong. Remember, you are worthy of love exactly as you are. Until next time, keep believing in the beautiful possibilities of connection.